Discussing the arrest of economist and NASA strategist David Ndii yesterday, and what emanates from that arrest. Altogether in studio for this conversation is governance expert Kevin Osido and lawyer Steve Ogola. And Kevin, before we went on break, you had something to add on the manner in which this arrest was carried out and the space of the police and their training, who gives them orders, and whether they themselves can individually uphold and protect human rights.
Michelle, in my view, the most important thing at this point is probably to underscore the fact that Kenyans are much more informed about their rights, and the police should not imagine that whatever powers they have and exercise, they are doing so in a vacuum. Because one, we have a very progressive constitution that we can only be proud of if we exercise it to the spirit and to the letter. Number two is that this constitution was informed by lots of reform processes, which emanated from the 2007 processes all the way to when we promulgated the constitution. And one of those very important processes was the security sector reforms, which also included the police reform process. And so the police probably, in addition to the apology, which we spoke about a few days ago, and Steve has just reiterated again, the IG needs to come out, because sometimes I really get disturbed, for instance, when I hear the president congratulating people who have been seen to be committing serious atrocities against Kenyans and acting with a lot of brutality. But there is nowhere, because I was going through the police reforms. I trained in that process, but this week I've also been writing about what has been happening, and especially in response to what the memo that has been doing rounds coming from the House on the Hill. The fact that the police need to be aware that they also have relatives, and that whatsoever you do to one person here may be happening to your brother, your sister elsewhere. But much more important to note is that Kenyans are much more informed about their rights. They know the rights of, for instance, Article 49 on the rights of an arrested person. They know what the police needs to do. And many times I see people joking about the police from our neighboring country. Naomba nikushike ama naomba nikutie pingu. You know, the police comes with a lot of dignity and a lot of respect. So much such that when you want to talk about issues of police and human rights, police being topmost human rights defenders, the police need to know that even if you're waiting for an over a radio call to give you some bit of powers or orders to go and act in a certain manner, just remember always that as at the point when you're acting, you are the person who is presently at that point or location of your action. How will your action be taken by whoever you're going to met it on? So I think that for me, we want to see police acting in a manner that we reduce the gaps that continue to be broadened between the citizens and the police, because one of those major concerns has been the attitude of the citizens to the police. But the people who are actually propagating this attitude, in my view, is actually the police. So how they are going to ensure that they work towards reversing the trends, so much so that the citizens can be able to sit in an environment where they feel secure and safe to engage with the police. Michelle, we've been doing some work as County Governance Watch with young people in the slums of Nairobi. And one of the biggest concerns they have is even the ability to go and report a case. You know very well that so-and-so is an offender, is this and that. But just the fact that you will be termed as the first suspect by the police. So every day, we hope that the institutions that need to work for the sake of Kenyans will work. But I think that the people who actually need to ensure that these institutions work and that the issues, the gaps that continue to expand and broaden between the citizens and the police are actually the police. And the police, because they're the ones that have been given much more greater power than the citizens, have much more obligation to ensure that they work towards the interests of the citizens, and not for us to be seeing, like Steve has rightfully said, I really agonize and empathize with this process, because if a senior world-renowned economist like David Ndii is going to be subjected through this.
What about the
How
rest
about
of us?
just the common Kenyan, you know?
And of course, David Ndii is a man who is not new to many. He's a very controversial man. I have an article of his here he wrote very recently about Kenya being an abusive marriage, and it is time to talk divorce. So he has been propagating talks of cessation. He has, said in public that the opposition will swear in Raila Odinga on the 12th of December. I mean, part of his article here says, when people people can find that they cannot live together, they part company. Kenya is for the most part an abusive relationship. It is time we start talking about ending it, though it might be a difficult conversation. This is part of what, according to NASA leaders, led to his arrest. According to the charge sheet, that it was incitement to violence. But David Ndii says what he said or what he writes is not incitement. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
So it will exist as long as the goals, we have said that quite clearly, it will exist until what we consider a constitutional government is re-established in Kenya. So it has two ends. Either it will end up with a political transformation of Kenya as we know it, or it will end up into separation of two countries which do not agree on how they should land themselves.
All right, and that is the man at the heart of the saga, David Ndii. There, like I was asking you, Steve, is this something that is causing panic and tension within State House itself, that we're seeing this kind of arrests being made?
Well, it shouldn't for two reasons. One is intellectual freedom. David Ndii has the right to express himself. And if he does express his views, whether they match the expectations of the government of the day or not, that shouldn't concern the government. That is how people, in fact, there could be lessons to be drawn from those. I remember, in comparison, in 2013, most scholars criticized the manner in which the Supreme Court delivered the 2013 judgment. I mean, and it was taken as part of the intellectual discourse. But more importantly, the underlying issue, you can't stifle the debate on secession for two reasons. One, because it's a legal issue, and two, because it's a practical sense issue. As a legal issue, the Constitution constitutes the people. If the people don't wish to be constituted, it's open to them to discuss it. Now, the only thing is that the process of secession is more difficult and more lengthy, that realizing it in the next 10 years will be probably a challenge. Because of the, there are the domestic issues that you must deal with, the demographics, the geography, the history. Who are these people that want to secede? Where are they? How do you deal with the people that don't want to secede in that area? Once you have a shared and settled approach, then you must build consensus on the international plane, whether really it is desirable for Kenya to divide itself. You get? Because again, globally, the world is moving closer. You get? The world is moving closer. We've seen, if you follow what happens in global politics, in Canada, for instance, they have been unable to amend the Constitution to remove the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth, as the head of state of Canada. She has no role, no prominent role, but she still enjoys that prestigious position. So, but then the debate to amend the Constitution to relieve her of those duties, those ceremonial duties, have been made difficult because the Quebec part, the French-speaking part, may want to secede. You get? And we know what happens with Dalai Lama and that part of Tibet, that forever, for a long time, wants to be recognized as an independent state. And when Dalai Lama went to the U.S., the contestation between the U.S. and China. But I mean, other places, so most generally on the international plane, countries are moving closer. In fact, even the African Union is reviewing, discussion to have one united African state. You get? So once you overcome the national, domestic challenges, because you may end up devolving, or maybe when you secede because of a particular problem, you must be sure that those problems won't occur at the lower level. If it is exclusion, is it just political? Is it historical? Is it whatever kind of exclusion? If you deal with it locally, you must also win the international support, the UN agencies, because as a state, you must be recognized.
Right. So
if the UN refuses to, so it's a lengthy process, both and a very complex one. But the discussion on secession is a legal discussion that can't be stopped. Not even the court can stop it.
Right, so,
but I think in the manner to stop it or deal with it is to try and pick out, for instance, in David Ndii's commentary, what is it that he seems to say that the government of the day needs to address? You don't want, as part of your legacy, that Kenya started the discussion for secession in your term as president. Because if you look at Article 131, the authority of the president, he is the symbol of national unity. It will be a spectacular fail if discussion on secession begins and crystallizes in Uhuru's term. You get? because then he has failed to unite the country. He would rather he deals with the issues. You know, and most of these issues are reform-related. We have now 5 years to interrogate key processes, you know, of election. I think the discussion about secession emanates largely from what NASA considers to be part of electoral injustice. How can we deal with these processes as part of our investment for the future, meaning 2022 and beyond? If people are able to harmonize their differences, then there'll be no need to continue the discussion of secession. But threats and intimidation as a way of stifling the discussion of secession, that approach is dead on arrival, is bound to fail. In fact, it might actually lend credence to that debate. I would want to appeal to the president, because this is a matter that touches on him now directly as the head of state and the head of government. As the head of state, capture all views, divergent views, views that you like, views that you don't like. Try to see what is it that people are communicating to you, and how can you address it so that Kenya moves forward as a united nation.
All right. And of course, going from the opposition, from David Ndii, the likes of Raila Odinga, it's not about to stop anytime soon. Raila Odinga also condemned the arrest, saying they do expect, however, several similar arrests on their allies to continue. David Ndii just last week was installed as the head of the steering committee for the formation of people's assemblies, something that had been stopped by a Kitui court, but NASA then went ahead to defy that court order. Maybe just very briefly with you, Steve, could we say then that bit of his statement was unconstitutional for David Ndii?
If it was unconstitutional, it should have been arrested, and prefer so that we see how it has been framed. But I have something for NASA. You see, the People's Assembly as a concept is not illegal, it's not unlawful, it's not unconstitutional. It is what you do with the People's Assembly. In fact, civil society have been convening the People's Assemblies. Bunge la Wananchi, People's Assembly, you could reference it in Article 10, public participation in the manner in which you are being governed. But what I disagree with is this: you can't manipulate a constitutional provision for political benefit. And certainly, you can't use the discourse on People's Assembly to pass laws or to usurp powers that you don't have. For instance, the county assemblies, by law, cannot legislate on national matters. That is the preserve of the National Assembly. They're supposed to break down national legislation to county-specific needs. Number two, county assemblies cannot legislate in a manner that usurps or offends the Constitution. If they do so, as the High Court in Kitui has done, all those laws will be invalidated, including the bills. It is very dangerous for NASA to continue, because I saw during the electioneering campaign, both NASA and Jubilee believing that they can operate outside the law, that they are immune to legal processes. It is very dangerous, even for NASA now, to continue to disregard a court order. There is a court order stopping the establishment of the People's Assembly until a proper framing is done. What the court did not do, the court cannot stop discussion on the People's Assembly, but the court framed and said, from what is presented before me, the intended consequence of this People's Assembly is to delegitimize lawful authority. Now, that is illegal, and NASA knows it. NASA should be careful on how they approach constitutional issues. Do not start within the Constitution and then innovate outside the Constitution, because what you do now is your investment in the future. You know, this discussion about People's Assembly, you never know. It may mutate into something else. NASA, based on their past conduct, they may either want to rely on it, or their past conduct may be what may be used against them, because then you're pushing agenda which looks harmless, but when it mutates into something else, people will see, but we are able to join the dots going backwards. I think it's safe to say this. If NASA persists, again, somebody should move to court for contempt, to cite NASA leadership for contempt of court, because the court has spoken, saying that you don't proceed until the case pending in Kitui is finalized. The case in Kitui applies across the country. You know, the High Court has jurisdiction. The High Court judgments, whether they're issued in Nairobi, Kitui, Mombasa, Siaya, they apply across board to the entire country. So NASA cannot say that discussion on People's Assembly has been stopped only in Kitui. The whole country, all the 47 county assemblies must respect the High Court.
All right, let me stop you
If
there.
they
Just
don't,
hear from
they
Kevin
will not
for a
be
minute.
able
He's
to
been
rely
quiet for a while.
on the courts again.
Yes, let's listen in to Kevin. Because Kevin, so far 12 counties across the country have already formed the People's Assemblies before that Kitui court order. And Raila Odinga, rather, is said to be sworn in as the People's President on the 12th of December. But others will say it is a mere political statement. It is not something that will happen. It is a political statement. But what is the implication of that statement on Raila Odinga's own image and on the morale of his supporters as well?
Of course, Raila Odinga and NASA, now NRM, has to find a way of motivating its supporters and his supporters for that matter. And in my view, I still wonder how this swearing in is going to happen without, for instance, a deputy president, because His Excellency Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka is out of the country. I have tried to ask friends who are learned, like Steve here and others, the provisions of the Constitution on swearing in an individual as a president without a deputy president. Of course, LSK has gone ahead and said the swearing in is not illegal. It can happen. They can proceed. But I think for me, the biggest question would be the implications of this on this place, so this part of the world we are calling Kenya. Because for a long time, this country has gone through very serious issues, but we have remained resilient as a people. We have stood very strong, and there is nothing that has continually scared us off our nation and has managed to do so. And Kenya has really, gone through serious issues, Michelle. But in all these things, we've always found out, by God's grace, a way out of them. And I do not still think that this parallel swearing in is going to be the best solution of this. But it's going to be, in fact, a precursor, in my view, to a lot of challenges that are going to come forward. And how, especially the president, who is the head of state and head of government and the symbol of national unity, is going to mutate around all the people who, of course, are advising him, mutate around the people's feelings around his presidency, and this is his last term, and how he is going to manage. But not again that we are talking national, but we also have county levels, and people's assemblies are engaging at the county level. Counties will not be stopped. Yes, there is a case in court. There could be contempt of court issues, but Kenyans will tell you, we have seen that before. There has never been anything serious around it. But that is a precedent that, again, we have set for ourselves. And how that is also going to carry on independence of institutions like the judiciary, the exercise of other independent institutions like the executive, which is the seat of the president, and how these institutions are going to engage will have, in my view, a replicate to what is going to happen at the counties. But county people are speaking that we are uncomfortable with certain things, and we are hoping that someone is going to be listening to us. Unfortunately, the ears that meant to be listening, Michelle, are not doing that. And that is why Kenyans are therefore, at least for the majority who are NASA supporters, coming out with a platform within which they feel they can be able to vent and engage. So if this opportunity to ventilate can be opened up, so that, for instance, when Raila Odinga goes to the US and he comes back, you don't have to welcome him with tear gas and all. Allow people to just ventilate, allow them to cry it off, allow them to say it off, because that is a space that is, in my view, opened up to anyone. But we must never forget that what happens today has a direct impact on what is going to happen to the future of this country. But as a Kenyan, I would want to be so proud of a country that can be able to, remain resilient, brave all this heat that we have as a people, and just be able to say that Kenya can only move forward if we remain, not to pamoja necessarily, because each of us have different issues that we are dealing with, but counties have been able at that level to generate a platform for them to ventilate, and how that is going to inform the next political and leadership and even governance issues in this country, I think will be a discussion that we can have.
Stephen, just before you jump in, I mean, on the dailies today, I believe on the Nation, there is a cartoon there signaling that the Jubilee administration has made freedom of expression very difficult, looking at the arrests that we have seen. And we're constantly saying as a country, we need dialogue, we need to speak out. But when people speak out, then we see this kind of repression on what they're saying. Is it, time to go, Kevin?
Michelle, first of all, I just wanted to make an appeal to the media. You see, part of our responsibility, especially as lawyers, when we come on set to national TVs like this, is to do civic education.
Right.
Once we say and I think we've said it many times, that the so-called swearing in is not a legal process. That is a process, that's a political process to continue to mock the presidency, delegitimize Uhuru's government. So I think because you can't have lawyers all the time in every show and every hour, I think if the media can also pick up the legal points and which have been settled and say that if NASA is proceeding with any event on 12th, that is part of their program of action to delegitimize Uhuru's government.
Let's just focus on that for a moment,
yes.
because Kevin said earlier that the LSK had, given a go-ahead, saying that the swearing-in can happen. That is still within the legal profession. So what seems to be the division there?
Is it divided?
No. You can't misquote LSK in that manner, because I belong there, and I'm sure.
So set it right. Where does LSK stand?
Swearing in under Article 141 is a consequence of an election, because you're swearing in the president-elect. There has to be an election. There has to be a winner declared by IBC. There has to be contestation, if at all, resolved by the Supreme Court. The matter is settled there. All of us know Raila did not go to the ballot. We know he was not elected.
Right.
So even going to the details of how they swear, whether Kalonzo will be back or not, that's too much merit on a political activity, not a legal activity. What LSK would have said is this, and without the benefit of their eloquence, because I never saw that statement, but I'm sure what they meant is this. Anybody is entitled to mock anyone or anything. If I want to swear myself as the president, I do so only to mock your position. But it has no legal effect. I think the fact that there will be no swearing in on 12th of December, I think that issue is settled. Let us deal with the political point, which is the disruptive nature, the intended consequences, the political benefits that comes to such an activity. The People's Assembly, the swearing in, non-recognition, David Ndiz he talks about until a legitimate government is formed.
Right.
I don't think a government that has a professor of law as the Attorney General would raise alarm over such a statement by an lawyer who says that we don't recognize this legitimate. Of course, we know legality has been settled and Uhuru Kenyatta is serving as president. The government is functioning, including parliament. These are political discourse and the government should not try to stop them. But I think even media must begin to isolate what are the legal issues in the talking points that have been settled, so that we continue sensitizing the public that you may go to Kasarani or Uhuru Park or Jacaranda grounds for whatever ceremony. You do that partly as a broader program to make a political statement, but you will walk out of that Jacaranda ground or whatever ground knowing that you don't have a president because the president is already in the place. So I think, once we settle that, the viewers who maybe may have missed other shows will then benefit. And I hope also, Michelle, that next time when I come on set, I won't be asked about the swearing in because the law is settled.
We definitely will. But even as you said,
yes.
Steve brings in an important point.
Yes.
It may just be a political event, not really a legal event, but what are the political implications, the social implications thereafter, and the very fact that they have chosen the 12th of December. It is a day for national celebration. Yeah. It is a national event. What do you think is a symbolism of choosing that particular day?
Two things. One, as we already said earlier on, the Right Honorable former Prime Minister must continuously rejuvenate his masses. And you note that this is, again, not the first time he's talking about a swearing in. He mentioned it, and then he said the people wanted him sworn in. He didn't think it was good. And indeed, it is still not right for him if this narrative and this debate continues, because Raila Odinga is more or less one of those people that I would consider a statesman. Because if you were to enumerate, the kind of things that the gentleman has fought for the sake of the several generations that have, of course, come and that will continue to come, there are so many, and I cannot mention, other than the former Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai, there is no any other person in this country, I would say, that can be able to stand tall, to be able to have certain measures of what they've been able to fight for the sake of this country. And I don't think that the Right Honorable Raila Odinga wants his legacy or even his name to go down in that manner. And how this, therefore, is managed is going to really be instrumental in determining what next for Raila Odinga. But in my view, again, it doesn't matter, because we have seen in other countries swearing-ins taking place. Uganda here, they keep having swearing-ins of Mheshimiwa Besigye almost, So this has to continue happening. But again, I'll continue to say, as we've said before, that how the two gentlemen are going to manage this. Sababu Waswahili husema fali wawili wakipigana ni nyasi ndio humia. So in this case, we are the grass, the citizens, the normal people who just want to have their life going on, who want to struggle, want to hustle our ways around our issues, and expect that there's going to be service delivery to us to meet our needs and our aspirations of devolution, but that the President, Uhuru Kenyatta, and Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga must find a way out of this quagmire and miasmatic situation that they have put us in, because really this is their own making. Were they not to subject us to this, I am sure that these are people who talk, they can be able to pick phone calls, they can be able to get into a chopper and go to Zanzibar, or even go to wherever they want to go to, and just have a discussion around how do we move this country. And the obligation is even much more higher to the president, because as we saw happening, he's already sworn in and is in office. How do you want to pick up this country and move forward? Is this a kind of legacy that you want to leave for the people of Africa, and especially for those who reside in a place called Kenya? I don't think Uhuru Kenyatta wants to go down that lane. So it will be incumbent upon the two of them and the people who are around them to pick up these pieces and be able to mosaically design and draw a nice place for Kenyans, where Kenyans can be able to reside in peace, and of course will be guaranteed of their safety and of their security.
All right, thank you, Kevin. And just drawing from that, President Uhuru Kenyatta has been sworn in. He also swore during his swearing-in ceremony that he will be the president of all. So it is a tall order for him. You mentioned earlier, there is time for the president to sit back and listen to the actual message that is being given by the opposition, other than the political statements. What would you say, very briefly, Steve, the president needs to pick out from the opposition and find a middle ground?
Two things. Number one, all of us love this country and we care that Kenya should rise while preserving its democratic credentials. That means the president must, insofar as it depends on him, preserve the ability of people to express themselves without fear of intimidation or harassment. Number two, the president, as a matter of necessity, is the one governing, must reach out. Reaching out actually is not a political favor, it's a legal requirement, because the Constitution, Article 10, requires a consultative, deliberative, and negotiated approach to governance. That means he must at least reach out to Raila Odinga and everyone else. What is it that you care for, and how can I work with it? And also to NASA. Honestly, Michelle, I really empathize with NASA's position, because part of not going to the election was to stop the election. But now the legal reality is that we have a government that is now functional, that is protected by the law for the next 5 years. It is not possible to reverse that. So you need to demobilize the supporters and then also get them to co-opt them into this lived reality now, that now there's a government in place, and then isolate what are the outstanding critical reform questions so that we work on them over the next 5 years to make election better. Finally, the greatness of this country will depend on its ability, Michelle, to resolve its questions, its problems in a timeous manner and without external assistance.
All right, and of course, we are hoping that we have already seen the opposition calling out for the international community to come in. So let's take a look at how that will work out. That is Steve Ogola, who is a lawyer, joining us here on The Political Point, as well as governance expert Kevin Osido. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on The Political Point on Morning Express. It is 5 minutes to the top of the hour. At this point, we'd like to release our viewers watching us on our KTN Home channel. Life and Style is coming up next. For those on KTN News, Morning Express takes a short commercial break. Just stay with us, still more to come.